This is Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Sports is business. And whenever you are procuring talent, you must start with a criteria.
Being owners of this league and wanting our league to be the best in the world, how do we make it better?
The valuations are getting so high, the list of people who could purchase a team was getting really short.
We have 8 strategic investment areas when you look at the world of sports.
The NBA is already in 210 countries around the world.
NFL is an amazing thing for the sports betting industry.
We have the World Cup coming in 2026 to North America.
Hey, if I get $1 million for going to a school, trust me, I'll be there.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr. Scarlet Fu is off this week, and we'll hear from Damian Sassower a bit later in the program. Sitting in this week, we have Vanessa Perdomo. She is editorial lead for sports on Bloomberg Originals and Bloomberg Sports business reporter Randall Williams. On the way, we'll turn to a unique corner in the sports world, jet suit racing. That's right, you heard me. We'll talk with Richard Browning. He is the founder and chief test pilot for Gravity Industries, which designs, building, and flies jet suits.
To paint a picture, you are wearing a backpack which has the fuel and other engine management systems in it. You have then, depending on the model, you have between 1 and 3 engines in the back that are lifting you from the back. And then on each arm, you have a pair of little engines, little jet engines. And the net result of each pair feels like you are just leaning on a surface. You know, it's sort of balanced around each arm.
We'll also talk with Randall and Vanessa about their experience on Radio Row for the first Vegas Super Bowl. We'll hear some conversations they had from Radio Row and get their thoughts on the future of sports in Las Vegas. That is all straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But first, we talk combat sports. Marquell Martin is founder and chief executive officer of 3.0 Labs. It's a sports advisory and innovation company with ties to the combat sports. Francis Ngannou is one of the top fighters in the world and one of Martin's top clients. Here to talk with us about Ngannou's future as a boxer, plus some of what 3.0 Sports does, we welcome Marquell Martin to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Michael, Vanessa, Randall, thank you guys for having me on. It's an honor. But starting with Francis, he's absolutely that guy who's always bet on himself, right? So, you know, when I started representing him 6 years ago, and he told me a little bit about his life story, and I'm just giving this for context, he's the guy that's always bet on himself, right? So to see where he's at today, undisputed UFC heavyweight champion turned boxer, it's to no surprise to myself, but very much a surprise to many others. In this sense that he's always had this dream of becoming a boxer when he first left Africa, and to see what he's doing today on the biggest stage is nothing short of incredible. It's a movie, and I'm just honored to have been a part of his journey and life. And come March 8th, he's gonna show the world again what he's capable of.
Marquell, can you talk a little bit about the trials and tribulations over the past couple of years? I feel like it's been written about a lot, but hasn't been spoken about in terms of just your conversations with the UFC that eventually led to the deal with the PFL. The PFL essentially saying, hey, we're open to Francis boxing as well. We just want to make sure he joins back in their decagon again. It's not an octagon for people listening. It's a decagon, I believe.
Yeah, the journey, you know, for combat sports, you know, obviously it's one of the greatest sports in the world. But at the end of the day, like all sports, it's a business, right? And unfortunately, and from my perspective, the business things of combat sports haven't yet caught up to, you know, the big four that we know, right? In the other sports world. So in dealing with UFC, and mind you, you know, I worked at UFC for close to 5 years, right? Prior to them being acquired by WME. And, you know, when I started representing Francis, one of my goals were for everyone that I represented is to educate them on the business as a whole, right? Having worked at UFC, that gave me kind of a different lens and perspective. Now, of course, naturally, you're gonna if you kind of buck the system, so to speak, you're going to get natural pushback. My job as a manager, as a representative, is to represent my client. I have a fiduciary obligation to them, right? I want to get the most amount of value for what it is that they represent and do. And to me, in the case of Francis Ngannou, what he represented was more than just a fighter. Obviously, you have to win, right, in the competition that you have at hand. But knowing the business of the sport, UFC is a global sport. MMA is a global sport, right? And the fan base that Francis has garnered throughout his talent and with his story is, again, amazing. And so, my job is to make sure that he's compensated for that. Unfortunately, UFC had a different side of things, right? And the UFC is the brand, and they do a tremendous job. I'm not here to throw shade at them. Like I love them. I'm still a fan. I still watch the sport. What Dana White has done has been incredible. But one of the greatest opportunities for any athlete is to understand their market value, right? So when it came to be a chance for Francis to be a free agent in December of 2022, he wanted to explore that, and PFL, rightfully so, as a growing organization in the MMA space, right? The co-leader in MMA, as I like to say, they saw the value in Francis and wanted to recognize that. So we were able to put together an amazing deal for Francis and the PFL, which allowed Francis to also realize his value on the boxing side. So I think at the end of the day, UFC, is still going to be UFC, right? We all know and love them. PFL is growing and making a name for themselves, and Francis has the opportunity to really show his skill sets across multiple disciplines for the world to see.
Now, you've talked about, combat sports and the UFC not really being up to date with the rest of the main four, as in athletes don't have as much say over their career. And so do you think that UFC's deal with WME is going to hinder maybe some progress where they could go down that path? Or do you see there's still a path for, fighters to take more control over their career?
No, that's a great question, Vanessa. I feel as though with WME, kind of being new ownership, I think it almost helps propel UFC in the right direction, not only for themselves as an organization, but for the fighters. I think that they're understanding that, hey, the world is changing, right? Information spreads like wildfire. The fans are demanding, a great product year over year. What they're doing in terms of forming TKO, right? And kind of having the WWE, right? Which is a storied entity in and of itself. And combining that with UFC, I think it only helps fighters, right, in the future. But what I'm curious to know and learn, and it's still kind of new, right, TKO forming, is how they intend to allow crossover, right? Because one of the things that we understood from UFC in past is that these fighters don't have as much rights and say so over their brand and likeness. And what I mean by, in terms of other sports, right, you can see what a first round pick is making and negotiate off of that. It's kind of like set. There's more of an opportunity. There's a players association, right? That's in place. In college, there's name, image, and likeness. So I think that overall, things for combat sports and the landscape in MMA in particular is trending upwards, right? And I think that's from a business standpoint and just terms of legitimizing the sport globally and as from a league standpoint, but also from a fighter standpoint. But it's up to the fighters. At the end of the day, it's up to the fighters, in my opinion, to really advocate for their rights, right? Advocate for their opportunities, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's brand value. And it's important, right? One of the things that I've always set out to do is just educate these athletes on understanding their value and realizing that value. And that makes for a better product for everyone, not just themselves.
Huddle around the set, kids. Old man Barr is going to tell a story here about boxing. Well, back in my day,
ye olden times,
the ye old days, we used to wait We couldn't even believe it when Muhammad Ali and Howard Cosell would get together on Wide World of Sports, and they would do the interview, and they just talked. It was like, oh, my goodness. And back in the day when Ali and Joe Frazier were fighting, didn't even call it pay-per-view. It was closed circuit. That's how old I am back in the day. Now, today, boxing has kind of slipped compared to, the MMA and stuff like that. Can a Francis Ngannou bring it back to where people are saying, hey, I got to watch his boxing match?
Oh, 100%. Francis is doing that and has already done so with him fighting Tyson Fury, right? And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a new kind of figurehead in boxing, which is His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, right? When Francis made a trip to Saudi Arabia about a year and a half ago, he met His Excellency. Right. And the first thing he asked him, Francis, what do you want to do? He said, I want to box. He said, where? He said, I would like to box in Saudi Arabia. Right. And now you're seeing the issue with, and maybe, you're a little bit older than me, right? Because you just dated yourself, for sure. But I will say the issue with boxing has been that the fights that people want to see don't always get made. Of course, in the Ali days, I'm sure the best were fighting the best. Then it became a more of a commercial kind of product, and now what I think we're seeing is going back to the best fighting the best. So now, Francis, your question is, can Francis bring that back? I think he can, and he's already doing so, because you have not only the boxing world looking at these athletes in a different light, meaning MMA athletes coming over, but you're seeing the MMA audience, which is younger, which has a better understanding of the sport of MMA, right? And it's bringing that fandom. So I think there's a yearning brewing across all of combat sports, and I think is going to start with Francis Ngannou continuing on this opportunity for, hey, if you're a fighter, you fight, period. And that's what we're seeing today.
Marquell Martin, founder and chief executive officer of 3.0 Labs Incorporated. You, sir, are golden just for coming on the show and joining us here with the Bloomberg Business of Sports, and we appreciate your knowledge. Thank you again, sir.
God bless. Thank you guys for having me.
That's Marquell Martin. He is founder and CEO of 3.0 Sports and represents top fighter Francis Ngannou. Special thanks to him for joining us. Up next, we turn to jet suit racing. Yeah, buddy. That is straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr. Gravity Industries wants to pioneer a new era of human flight. It designs, builds, and flies jet suits. And then they're going to race them. This week in Dubai, Gravity is going to help launch the very first sporting contest in the world featuring opponents who take flight without an aircraft in the Dubai jet suit race. Earlier this week, Damian Sassower, Vanessa Perdomo of Bloomberg Originals, and I got to sit down with Richard Browning, founder and chief test pilot for Gravity Industries, to talk about the race and more. Let's listen in on that conversation, starting with him describing the type of technology his company uses.
I guess quite a few folks listening might have come across the visuals of what we're talking about here. This is a jet suit from Gravity. They might have seen a medic flying up a mountain. They might have seen what looked like a Royal Marine soldier flying onto a Navy boat. Two of those films, I mean, we've had those going around for a few years, and they've done hundreds of millions of views. It's that technology. We're talking about a bunch of little jet engines attached to a human being in a way that allows you to fly, in many people's minds, as close as you can get to a superhero flying. Except now, having done over 300 events in 45 countries and built a medic and military business, we're going one step further and building an actual race series. And that is happening in Dubai. So it's pretty exciting.
So Richard, tell us about the suit here. Tell us about what it costs to build the suit, how much it costs to fly the suit, how heavy the suit is, what's the duration for each flight, and how are you structuring this race? I mean, how are people going to, I have to believe it's pretty expensive, right? So, I mean, talk to us about how many people are involved in the race. How's it going to work?
Firstly, so to paint a picture, you are wearing a backpack which has the fuel and other engine management systems in it. You have then, depending on the model, you have between 1 and 3 engines in the back that are lifting you from the back. And then on each arm, you have a pair of little engines, little jet engines. And the net result of each pair feels like you are just leaning on a surface. You know, it's sort of balanced around each arm. And then by using amazing human balance and stability, and I mean amazing in the fact that humans can walk and run about on 2 legs, we train people in LA, London, and soon Dubai to be able to fly these things. We've trained over 600 people. Even my kids learned when they were 13. And it is one of those bicycle, snowboarding, skiing processes where it's very hard to explain how you do it. But the least you think about it, the quicker you pick it up on our training tether, and then off you go. So it's a very small piece of equipment, really, and it's very much using human balance and physicality. I mean, we have retailed them very carefully to an elite number of people for about $450,000. Our main markets really are the military and medical community. But as the race series grows, we will be retailing more and more of these for specific racing over water to keep it safe. But then really compared to a NASCAR and IndyCar, I mean, that's, you know, the most components on those cars cost more than that. If you throw them in the water, which is part of the racing, you know, you're not supposed to do it, but when it inevitably happens, then it's a few $1,000s to refurbish it and off you go again. So, you know, in the scheme of top-end sport, this is a very cost-effective way of delivering what to most people will look like real-life Marvel superheroes pushing the limits of human and machine capability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does look like Iron Man's just flying up there. But I'm also glad you said that part about like snowboarding and skiing. It's hard to describe how you do it because I have been trying to learn how to become an avid snowboarder, and it's not panning out exactly how I would like, but I can kind of do it. So who are the other people, the other athletes that are going to be in the circuit, and how do they get trained, and how long does the process usually take?
Right. So we are, you know, essentially building from scratch what we hope to be a new whole sporting franchise alongside all the events and all the other activities we do. And so to kick that off, rather than having exactly this conversation of me, even though it's radio, waving my hands around and explaining what it is, I want within the space of the next week to be sharing with the world all the visuals of what this really looks like. But essentially, it's going to be a lot of my team pilots, guys and girls, who are event pilots and medic pilots and demonstration pilots. They will all be taking part in this race. And I mean, we haven't done this before. This is going to be, you know, proper innovation. We really do walk that walk, or fly that fly, if that's the phrase. We are going to be really just creating a showcase. We are calling it the inaugural showcase in partnership with Dubai, who have very much thrown their weight behind this. And races 2, 3, 4, etc. will then start to have other pilots from our network of other trained people from the worlds of media, social media, sport, and other places, who will increasingly then have other sponsors they bring to the table to sponsor suits. We've already got quite a few sponsors coming in. And really where I'm going with this is the world of motorsport has built an amazing playbook over 100 plus years of how do you have sponsored teams, sponsored locations, sponsored pilots, constructor championships, all of this good stuff. There is no reason why, if we are genuinely delivering value to our audience and sponsors, why we can't just build that out. But this is ground zero. This is starting from scratch, and the visuals, if you like, that'll go out after the race will have to show just how spectacular this is, which I really, you know, I mean, it looks pretty spectacular even from the stuff we put out already. We are very much going to be, you know, playing from that same motorsport playbook.
Well, Lord, you mentioned NASCAR. Don't have the big one, man, doing these things in the jetpacks, because this is rather dangerous if you're racing them. How many are in a race or a heat, or how does that even work?
So we're going to be, again, very much motorsport. We're going to be starting slow with individual pilots going around testing the course and then starting to lay down personal best times. Again, it's just like in motorsport. Right. And then we'll put head-to-head, pilots where you've got, let's say, the slowest two, next fastest pairs. So you've got a bit of the competitive elements. So they're starting to get used to the course and with other pilots in the air. And the whole thing snowballs up to the sort of final race day where you've got 7 or 8 pilots all going off at the same time, all explosively launching and all hammering around the course, with inevitably some people getting it wrong and going in the water. And the lovely thing about this is you deliver that critical thing for sport, which is that perception of risk and peril, and jeopardy, and yet actually you get it wrong, you fall in some water. So it's actually got, we believe, far less risk than most motorsport, and yet it's going to look epic.
You mentioned medical, you mentioned military. I mean, where does the suit live and breathe right now?
So if I just wind it back briefly, so I was a 15-year career commodity trader in the City of London, but my whole family came from the world of aviation and engineering, and I've also had a bit of a military background as well alongside that. And so if you put all that in a pot with a healthy dose of liking a crazy challenge, I hatched this idea of, could you augment human physicality and balance with just a bit of technology and fly in a way that everybody thought was impossible? And if you think about it, a bicycle, as unglamorous as that might sound, does that really well. You put a bit of steel and rubber on a human and suddenly they can hammer around at 40 miles an hour and travel hundreds of miles, and yet that bicycle by itself can't even stand up. It's when you think about it, that's amazing. So inspired in the same way, I thought, if you just add some minimal equipment to still use human balance and physicality, could you kind of achieve this? And I did it in 2016, and there's a whole ludicrous investment story which I can share with you if you're interested, which was not planned. But anyway, we ended up building a really quite successful business out of this from just doing events. Using my military background, it started to dawn on us that if you need to move special forces soldiers over mines, mud, wire, water at night in bad weather to deliver an objective and self-extract, we can do that better than any other platform out there. And so we've even operated in Ukraine. We've operated in with special forces all over the world, and we are now live with a number of special forces doing exactly that. So, I mean, not that I tried to build a real life Iron Man suit here at all. It's funny how we are copying from so many elements of that film, because yes, it's fun, but behind the scenes, we are not only delivering special forces soldiers over any terrain to deliver objectives, we're also now pushing the whole use of that to deliver first responder medic capability in very hard to operate terrain. And so that's really starting to happen now too.
Well, what's interesting to me there is that you're saying, when you first started out, that wasn't your goal, and that you had this crazy, investment story. I'd love to hear it, because, if that wasn't your goal when you first started out, when you first had this idea, what was, the application for you? And then when you started going to VC backers and potential sponsors, what were those initial pitches like? How did you get them to sign on?
Nothing about what we've done is normal, which is sort of applies to my life, I think. So, but to answer your question, I had no business model. I had no business plan. I just thought, for one or two opportunities in life, let's just try something that everybody says is impossible, where I see a tiny inkling that they might be wrong. Being in the spirit of innovation, which is all about taking risk, as long as that risk is recoverable, as long as you can get back up again and fight another day. If you're running a trading book, as you guys know, you have to be able to do that, or you don't keep your seat. Well, in the same way, when it comes to innovation, as long as you can get back up financially, reputationally, and from a safety perspective, you just keep iterating. And that's all I did. And I ended up arriving at something that I still, for the first year of presenting this around the world, had engineers step up and go, there's no way this should work. And I'd just flown it for them in their parking. Anyway, having got it to work, we launched with Wired and Red Bull, which were two brands that between them absolutely catapulted us in the right direction, especially for the British media, which is very primed and ready to stick you in the lunatic bin. That's dangerous. I have to say, your good country is far more open to the crazy, and hence why you've got so many billion-dollar companies. And the other side of the Atlantic, not so much, right? And it comes from that receptiveness that we don't have to the unusual. But on the way to do TED 2017, I got asked by Boost VC, run by Adam Draper, Tim Draper's son. If you know Tim Draper, pretty famous in the VC world. I didn't know who they were. I was too focused on destroying my reputation in front of the TED crowd.
Right.
And I did a little parking lot flight for them. And Tim Draper rushed up with a $100 bill, gave it to me as a bit of a joke as my first revenue for blowing out his parking lot, because I blew dust everywhere. And then he chatted to his son and said, right, we have to be part of this. How about $650,000 for 10% of the company? Actually, strictly speaking, he said $500,000. And I quickly put my trader hat on with the engine still cooling and said, I thought to myself, I should haggle here. I haggled him to 650 and raised that money in the parking lot in event number one, in a week one of revealing this world. So, and then it just kind of spiraled from there, really. And we genuinely have applied the same curiosity and willingness to experiment in a recoverable way to the commercial side of the business as we have the engineering side. And so we've just tried all sorts of things. And the businesses I've already mentioned are all the successes out of those experiments. And before we did our successful Series B raise last year, we were actually a net profitable company for a startup flying jet suits. How crazy is that, right? I mean, we were actually a profitable business. We were earning more than we were spending. I mean, no one does that in the startup world.
That's Richard Browning. He is founder and chief test pilot for Gravity Industries. Special thanks to him for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. Up next, we had boots on the ground in Las Vegas for the big game. We'll check in on what they learned about the future of big sporting events in Vegas, plus take a listen to a few of their special conversations during the Super Bowl. That's straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr. Scarlet and Damian Sassauer will be back next week. We do have special guest host with us. Vanessa Perdomo is back. She is the editorial lead for sports on Bloomberg Originals and Bloomberg Sports business reporter Randall Williams. They were both in Las Vegas on Radio Row for the Super Bowl. I want to start with you, Vanessa. What was it like?
Man, it's funny because it is lucky, right? It was an amazing experience. You see everyone walking around and you just have to pretend like it's totally normal that Emmitt Smith and Joe Montana and Gronk and everyone's just walking past you and you're like, hey, what's up? But it was great. It's a really long process. So we talked to a lot of interesting people. Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, talked to them both about, free agency and the running back market, and then just about Vegas and how interesting this Super Bowl being there was and how different it was compared to other ones, right? Randall, it's like very different experience than we've had before.
By the way, Randall,
for sure.
Yeah, I love it the way Vanessa just dropped some names in there. Yeah, Emmitt Smith came by. I told him, yo. But Randall,
it was Emmitt, it was Clark Hunt, it was Mahomes, it was Gronk, Edelman,
Josh Allen,
it was Deion, it was Shador, it was so many different people. Right. I think Vegas was really one of the rare. It felt like a perfect sports or Super Bowl city, I'll say, because you have the parties, you have the luster, you have the food, you have the players, and everyone really just wanted to be there. So it was a good experience. It was nonstop. I mean, I would never spend a week in Vegas for anything other than the Super Bowl and maybe a wedding. But yeah, by the end of it, it was great. But we were both so exhausted.
Yeah, I wish I could say that, but no. But
Michael, you had no reason to go. Your Lions folded. I mean, let's call it what it is. You could have won.
Yeah, okay, they did fold. I ain't gonna lie, but you know what? It back in the day, remember, the Super Bowl used to be back in Miami for several years, and I'm wondering now, Vanessa and Randall, if Vegas, because that's the moneymaker right there, Vanessa.
100%.
If that's going to be numerous on the slate forever.
Oh, definitely. Talking to people there, you just knew it was going to be. Now it's definitely in the rotation, and I think as the years go on, it'll be in a very heavy rotation. Like I could see it being every 3 or 4 years, kind of a thing, because it just was like Randall said, like it was very perfect, except for the traffic. I will say they need to figure that out because that was horrific. And it's not like New York, it's very different. Me and Randall were talking about it. The lights just feel like they take like 5 minutes to change. But other than that, it is like the perfect city. And I think it works out perfectly for the city and for the NFL because you have all the people that want to be there. All the players want to be there because they know they can make a lot of money this week, even if they're not playing in the game, maybe even more if they're not playing in the game, right? Because the reality is they get paid to go on Radio Row and talk about a lot of products, and they get paid a lot of money to do it.
The thing is, with more new stadiums being built, there's going to be more cities vying for an opportunity to host a Super Bowl. But Vegas has everything you want there. You have the casinos, you have the hotels, and like I said, the food and everything else. And it's all in a close proximity. That's why the traffic was so bad, is because there's so many people around. Now, the traffic wasn't nearly as bad as when I was at F1. But It is what it is. Vegas, I think Vegas will definitely be a twice a decade, maybe 3 times a decade of Super Bowl appearances.
Vanessa and Randall, thanks for taking the time to step in on the show today. Now let's take a listen to some of their conversations they had from Vegas at the Super Bowl, starting with Tony Gladney. He's a former NFL pro who spent time on the San Francisco 49ers in his career. Now he's at MGM Resorts International, serving as Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Let's listen in on some of his conversation with Randall and Vanessa, starting with his thoughts on having a big game in Las Vegas.
I personally, from being a former UNLV, student athlete, playing on the football team, and even, having a short career with the San Francisco 49ers and coming back, I would have never thought that, the Super Bowl would be here. But I think it came into fruition through opportunities for different sports teams coming here, opportunities. Who would have ever thought that, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Aces, women's WNBA, right? Champions back to back, right? Mm-hmm. Vegas Golden Knights champions, Las Vegas Raiders. So I believe that, throughout we were able to, I think, really show that as a part of what our core is, that sports capital potential is starting to come to fruition even more than the entertainment capital of the world.
So I did some calculations, because we just did this. Las Vegas is trying to become the sports capital of the world story, and it's over or nearly $7 billion invested in sports properties and teams over the course of 40 years, and a lot of that has really picked up recently. I spoke to Bill, and Bill told me, hey, if the NBA comes in town, we're going to offer up T-Mobile Arena. Talk to me about how that would work and the potential there.
Well, I think it's a potential, and I think it's a potential, as Bill expressed, that we are really open to opportunities such as, the NBA potential. I think that, it's our core. We have, many arenas. We have
rabid basketball fans.
Absolutely, rabid basketball fans, and MGM has a history of entertaining from a sports perspective, back to the days of boxing.
Yeah.
And so I believe that our company's up to the task if that potential presents itself. And as Bill expressed, I believe our company would do a great job at the given opportunity to be able to host that.
Well, this is almost like an audition in a sense. There's no event. I mean, the only thing that's probably bigger than the Super Bowl is a presidential election or something that makes national news. But in sports, the Super Bowl is it. I spoke to the NFL for the story, and one of the things that they said is they want you all to be in the rotation of Super Bowl host cities. How quickly do you want something like this back, and what can you improve upon to make sure that, hey, this is great, but let's make it amazing next time?
I've had the pleasure of being the co-chair of the Community Affairs subcommittee for the NFL host committee. Mm-hmm. And our dialogue has been, this is going to be one of the best Super Bowls, if not the best Super Bowl that the NFL and its fans have seen. And we believe that. That is our.
What makes Vegas that?
What makes Vegas is obviously our tourism experiences, obviously our amount of rooms, room availability, our entertainment venues. I look at a company like MGM Resorts, how we have a plethora of properties, or we have entertainment venues to serve you. But I think even more important, I think it's our community. You have citizens and you have community members from every city and state and region that move here. And so it's not, for us, we're no stranger to that. And so we believe that we do things big, we do things the best, and when we do have a weakness, we make sure that we build on our weaknesses. And if I can really, link that, one of our core concepts with customers is that we want customers to have an experience that they will keep coming back. Our key is that repeat business. And so it's no different than when we talk about the Super Bowl and when we talk about specific expansion of different types of sports coming. Well, I think the great part is we really take great pride in our properties, that you can have that one-stop shopping experience in our properties, to where obviously there's opportunities to be able to, leave, that property, but we make sure that you have everything that you need to be able to have that one-stop shopping experience, to be able to make sure that you're comfortable, to be able to be within the property. We're in Mandalay Bay now. Everything's been available to you and a whole lot more while you're here, we hope. And that's what our goal is.
That's Tony Gladney. He's VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at MGM Resorts International, speaking with Vanessa Perdomo and Randall Williams from Vegas on Radio Row at the Super Bowl. Vanessa and Randall also spoke with NFL star running back Saquon Barkley while they were hanging out in Las Vegas. Let's listen to some of their conversation, starting with his thoughts on the market for top-flight running backs in the NFL and his impending free agency.
It's the NFL. It's recency bias right now. That's the trend. It's going to change. I do think, though, with the franchise tag, obviously going through that, I feel like there's got to be a new way. Sadly, that's not going to happen for another couple years. That's just how it works with the CBA. But think about it this way. If the Giants were to franchise tag me, I'm not saying that they are, but if they were to franchise tag me, I would be on one team for 7 years, which I love New York, and I love, everyone knows that, but never, ever really getting a chance to maximize another contract.
Right.
And that's not fair. I won't say fair. I hate using the word fair because at the end of the day, we're playing a game called football that I've been playing since I was a little kid. Majority of my life, I played for free, and you're still making millions of dollars, and it's all relative, right? So I don't want to say fair, but in that way, it's, I never really got that chance if that was to happen. I don't think it should be. I don't think any player should be handcuffed. And to be honest, for some players, franchise tag's not bad. Franchise tag is still $27 million. I don't know what the wide receivers are. That's the first thing I think of around there. I don't know the exact number, but there's some guys in the locker room that's like, please franchise tag me. So it helps in some cases, but I think in a case where you can get a player for being good, for getting drafted high, for getting drafted in the first round, there's a negative thing that comes behind it where you get tagged. It's like a punishment in a sense, right?
That is NFL star running back Saquon Barkley talking with our colleagues Vanessa Perdomo and Randall Williams while they were in Las Vegas at the Super Bowl. And that does it for this week's edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports. I'm Michael Barr. Scarlet and Damian Sassauer will be back next week. And a special thank you to Vanessa Perdomo of Bloomberg Originals and Randall Williams of Bloomberg News for hopping in today. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big old money in the world of sports. You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.